Here's one of my favorite charts to share each year. It shows that even as the city's population continues to increase, now surpassing 422,000 residents, the number of precincts to serve that growing population has been cut. In 1990, when the city's population was less than 370,000, there were 172 precincts. Today, with the population approaching 425,000, Minneapolis has 132 precincts. So this impacts voter service. This widening gap between population and precincts, if unaddressed, can be expected to result in long lines, extended wait times at the polls, delays in accessing the ballot, and frustrated voters. It's especially true in a high turnout election like a presidential. According to guidelines promulgated by the Secretary of State, a precinct should not have more than 2,500 registered voters. And yet, of its 132 precincts, Minneapolis had 23 sites which exceeded these state-recommended limits last year. That's 17% of the total number of precincts that are simply too large. In fact, in last year's elections, of our 132 precincts, 19 served pre-registered populations between 2,500 and 3,000. The limit's 2,500. We had 19 that were beyond that, and 2 which had registered populations exceeding 3,000 pre-registered voters. Under a recent change in state election law, cities must now adopt their precinct plans for elections in the next succeeding year. So by December of this year, we have to adopt our plan for precincts and polling places that will serve the presidential primary, the August primary, and the November general election next year. In order to do that, we should be considering, and we'll be back in front of the council to talk about if 132 precincts is the correct number, or if we need to increase that number, and if so, where.
Do you have any history on why the decrease in precincts happened?
Mr. Chair, when I came in 2010, we were still in the business of cutting precincts, and the only reason we were cutting precincts is budget. The city was going through some very stark budgetary realities dealing with cuts from the state and LGA, and because of those, all departments were required to cut to the bone. And in the elections office, we had at that time only 4 people. So it was either cut 25% of that team or cut precincts. And precincts were the easier cut to make, even though there clearly has been and was impact on voters, highlighted for those who were here with me. And at the time, the chair of my elections committee was Councilmember Gordon, and he'll recall that the 2012 presidential election had extended long lines, wait times in some precincts as long as 6 hours. And that was in part due to 2 functions: too few precincts and same-day registration.